So here's one of the realities that I've seen in this space of dating and relationships with men specifically is that many of you are either or have been in a relationship, will be in a relationship, or are currently dealing with a relationship or even maybe some kind of a breakup at the moment. And as much as we may hear or see a lot of content on leave that woman alone, don't focus on her, all these different things, and I'm not saying those things are not applicable in many ways, there are going to be situations where you're dealing with a woman and you want to make it work. You feel like this is the woman for you. And even if there may be some ups and downs, some struggles, you want to see if you can get it to that next level of happiness and harmony and all these things. And unfortunately, as men, as human beings, there may be a moment in that relationship where you do something that hurts her. Maybe not necessarily maliciously, right? Not that you were planning on it, but just mistakes happen. Mistakes happen, and sometimes those mistakes lead to the trust being broken in some kind of way. All right. Now, again, I want to stress this doesn't make you a bad guy. I would argue this does happen on both sides. The longer you're with someone, the greater of a chance that a mistake is going to happen at some point, right? The issue to me is not the mistake. It's the way that we handle these things and how, because we're not aware of how to better approach the situation, we either end up making matters worse or we simply make things more difficult for us to come back together in harmony, okay? So I want to help you guys understand in those moments how you can regain your woman's trust. Now, some of you may have gone through that obstacle, gotten back with her, right? But you're still struggling with her fully trusting you enough to where you guys can get back to things being where you want it to be, okay? Either way, pay close attention because this is important. And even if you don't think you are dealing with an issue where you're trying to regain her trust, these are still very important things to understand when resolving conflict with the woman that you're with, all right? So one of the biggest things you need to do when you want to regain her trust is you have to acknowledge the issue, take accountability, and understand how she feels. So let's break that down. Because really, I want to focus more on the acknowledging the issue, right? And taking accountability for it. So one of the things that I see happen in a lot of relationships or for a lot of people who are dating is that, let's just say she asked you your opinion on something and you sent her a text, right? And she took that text in a very negative way. And she feels like you attacked her in that moment. Now, to you, it's like, you're tripping. I didn't attack you. What's wrong with you? These women are crazy. And you guys get into a battle of arguing the fact that you're trying to tell her, I didn't attack you. That's not what the problem is. She feels like you're not listening to me. I'm telling you, that's how I felt. And that disconnect can create other issues. So when we say acknowledge what was done, acknowledging does not mean you are agreeing to what you're being, quote unquote, accused of, okay? It means you are acknowledging and you're aware of how she received it and perceived it. So in this situation, it isn't you getting so caught up on fighting and defending yourself on the idea of, I did not attack you, because you know that was not your intent. You're fighting a battle you can't win, all right? Because that's how she felt. How you diffuse that is by acknowledging it, by saying, you know what? I'm sorry if that's how it made you feel. I understand that you felt like it was an attack, but I want you to know that was not my intent, all right? So by doing this, because when you fight, you dismiss her feelings. And if you dismiss her feelings, that will create more issues. That will create an environment where she doesn't feel like she can feel safe emotionally with you, right? And that will contribute to that lack of trust. But just being able to acknowledge how she feels and taking accountability, we'll get more into taking accountability in a second, but you're acknowledging how she feels is going to help bring it down a level. Now, I'm not saying that automatically will cure every issue, right? But I'm telling you, it will give you a much greater chance. And in many cases, that will do it. That in itself will like get her to be like, okay, cool. Now he's listening. He hears me. Okay. So acknowledge the issue. Now, taking accountability, because this is difficult when you feel like you're being accused of something that was not your intent. That's not what it was for you, right? And of course, there's going to be some situations where you flat out did what she said you did, okay? But, and in that case, you just have to take full accountability. But the one thing I want to highlight with taking accountability is that, yes, as I mentioned in the acknowledging of her feelings, you can acknowledge how it made her feel. You can acknowledge how she received it. You can take an accountability for, all right, I understand if maybe I could have used my words better, right? That's how you take an accountability, even though you're not saying, yes, you're right, I was trying to attack you. You're just saying, okay, you know what, you're right. I can improve on how I communicated so we can avoid you feeling that way in the future, right? But here's a big thing about the taking accountability that I have to stress. Because a lot of guys, when there is conflict with their girl, when they are trying to get her back or regain her trust, sometimes they try to overcompensate in taking accountability. So let me give an example. And some people ain't gonna like this, or if there's ladies watching this, they may not, but it's the reality of things. So one time I was coaching a couple and they got into a big fight because she found him flirting online, okay? And they're supposed to be, they are engaged and they're soon gonna get married. So they come to me for a counseling session and he's on there, he's acknowledging the issue, he's taking complete accountability. He's like, it was my fault, this will never happen again, I have to do better, all these things. But I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. I need to understand why this was even going on. Now, what I was able to pull out of him was the fact that she's been neglecting him. She hasn't been giving him time. She hasn't been there for him emotionally. There's a lot that was not being done on her part. Now, does that make him flirting okay? No. But we can't ignore the role that she plays in this issue or in creating this environment that's making it difficult for this man to stay on track. Because if we don't address that as well, no matter how much sorries him or you, whoever says, and how much you say, I'll never do it again, there's a very good chance you will. Because we are not correcting the underlying issues. So in taking full accountability, yes, take accountability for your part, but do not overlook any issues on her part that need to be addressed. Now, of course, does doing that raise your ability to quietly and smoothly get her back? No, I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to add another layer of difficulty. However, my goal isn't just to help you regain trust or get her back. My goal is to make sure you're in the right relationship and you're in a healthy relationship. And if there's an underlying issue on her part, again, that goes unaddressed, you're just setting yourself up for failure anyway, all right? But we're going to get more into that later in the video. But ultimately, first thing is take accountability, do not dismiss her feelings, and acknowledge the issue. All right, so here's another big thing you need to do when you're trying to regain her trust is you've got to understand the issue, why you did it, and then give a plan of action to avoid it happening again, all right? So let's use a different example right now. Was talking to another couple and very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very unique scenario and dynamic. I won't even get into the details, but let's just say one of the issues they were having was she laid out boundaries, all right, in regards to him coming over, like, you know, call before you show up, things like that. Let's just roll with that. You need to call before you show up. You can't just show up unannounced, okay? Now, they're dating, something occurs where he feels like the best thing to do is to pop up at the house to help her. But in doing that, he is crossing the line of the boundary that was set, all right? So she takes issue, naturally, but to him it's like, I was just trying to do what was best for you. And what he felt was best, what he felt was right. And so because of this, they they were butting heads for a while until I sat down, broke things down for him and for her to where they can now create, create harmony with each other. So in that scenario, he has to understand that he indeed crossed the line of the boundary and he used what his perception of what was best in that moment. Okay. And for him to now regain her trust that he's not going to keep doing that, one, he needed to understand what really drove him to make that kind of a decision, right? Why he can't go about it in that way. And when you can express these things, you can make her feel more comfortable because she feels like you actually get it, okay? And if you don't get it, if you are struggling with understanding the issue or even why you engage in such behaviors or actions, this is where talking to someone else is going to be helpful, but we'll get into that a little bit later as well. But then it was, all right, what's the plan of action going forward so we don't end up back at this place again? All right. So in their scenario, it was about, all right, how we communicate in the future. If this is the situation that's happening, what's the best way to handle it? And anytime we are questioning if we should just go ahead and pop up, what's the course of action to take that we can agree upon so that, all right, we're on the same page and we don't have this problem again. So it's important, whatever it is, and it could be something as simple, again, let's just use the flirting. I mentioned not saying, of course, not every guy is engaging in inappropriate flirting, but it happens, right? And again, we understand it's not the right thing to do. But you got to be real with yourself. Like as I used in the previous example, if any of this is being contributed to by what is lacking in the relationship, you got to be able to express that, acknowledge that, and understand that, okay? Because again, if we cannot understand and address the root of the issue, we will not be able to find resolution. Now, let's just say the root of the issue is within yourself. I had another client who, he expressed to me, he was in the Army, he was with his woman, and he was flirting with other women. From his own words, or what we figured out through talking long enough, was that even though he was in the military, he did not feel like he was in his purpose, all right? So he was struggling with his own self-esteem. And talking and flirting to women was a way of gaining validation and feeling better about himself, all right? It was a drug to him, you know what I'm saying? And so he kept running to that because it was the easiest thing for him to run to get that high, that dopamine, to feel good about himself, all right? So in that situation, he had to understand the deeper rooted issue of you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing in your life. You're not applying yourself in a way that you can feel good about who you are. And then there may be deeper other issues we need to address from childhood, from previous relationships, that's contributing to your struggle with self-esteem and why you use flirting with women as a way to feel better about yourself, all right? So all that to say, like, that's what's gonna help really break the cycle. And when you can express that or explain that to your partner, that brings a clarity that allows there to be peace. And with that peace allows the trust to start to build back up, all right? So it can be difficult. It's not the easiest thing, but know why you did it, understand the issue, and then come up with the plan of action to avoid it. So with that guy, real quick, like we had to come up with a plan of, all right, when he's feeling this way, what are some other methods or other things we can go to feel better about ourselves? As well as one of the plans of action for him was continuing counseling, but one-on-one, so that he can get rid of some of these traumas and deeper issues he's holding on to that need to be released. All right, so let's keep this thing going. And another thing a man needs to do when you want to regain her trust is you have to respect the process and give her time. Now, this is probably one of the most difficult things to do and deal with as a man who's trying to reconcile things with his partner, right? Because unfortunately, we don't always know how long this is going to take. We also don't know, will we get the end result that we want? Like, okay, I give her time. Does that mean she's going to come back to me, or she's going to go deal with some other guy? Like, there's all these fears and concerns running through you. But unfortunately, when you let those fears and concerns get the best of you, you end up applying pressure on her in a way that adds more stress and frustration. And you have to understand that if you indeed did uh, do violate the relationship in any kind of way, undermine her trust in any kind of way, then it's unfair to expect her to move on your timing, so to speak. But again, I understand that's difficult. So what I do think is best when you're dealing with this, if she's in agreement, is maybe putting time frames on checking in. So it's like, all right, she needs time. Now, needing time can look like two different things, because there are some people who did get back together and they're continuing to date or be in a relationship, but things aren't where they used to be yet because of this struggle to trust again. And so there's a time frame of waiting for her to get back to that place so we can be really good again. Then there's the waiting of time when it comes to she's saying, okay, I don't know if I can be in this relationship, and broken up, break, whatever, and in that time frame that we're dealing with. So let's start with it's a breakup, it's a break, whatever the case may be. In that situation, again, I think that what we can do is we can set forth some kind of framework. Like, all right, listen, how about we don't talk for the next week? Give time, but we need to then sit down and discuss things. Now, again, even though I said it's not fair for you to expect her to be completely on your timing, it's also not fair for her to drag things out and leave you just dangling. Even though, yes, you may have made a mistake, but it's not healthy for us just to drag things on without any kind of understanding of how we're going to approach this situation. Okay, but again, you don't want to pressure. You don't want to make her feel bad or guilty, because that's you don't want things to be repaired through guilt, through fear, through pressure. You want them to be repaired through clarity, through understanding, through resolution. Okay, so you can discuss with her if we can put a framework on it of the time we'll wait before we, check in with each other, see where things at, see how we're feeling, what's the course of action we want to possibly take. Allow her to give you her input on what she's comfortable with, right? And let's see what we can work with that. Now, again, I know there's people out there who's going to say, well, if a woman asks you for a break, just let her go completely. Again, this is very different than a woman who everything's going well, then out of nowhere it's like, yo, I need time apart. Versus you actually did something wrong. Okay? We got to be a little bit more flexible there when you actually did something wrong and you can acknowledge that. All right? So now if we're talking about we are in a relationship and we're trying to get things back to where they were. So we haven't broken up, but things are not where they used to be. There's still a level of we have to respect the time and process. But again, I'm also a believer of you can't be held hostage with her like holding this over your head forever. We're either going to move forward in a positive way or we're not. But I think initially there's nothing wrong with, again, framework, structure, checking in with each other, all right, and discussing what she needs from you in order for us to get back to that better place, okay? And I do think many may disagree with this, but I do think there even has to be an internal deadline for you to where, all right, let's just say, for example, for the next 3 months, and I'm not saying it has to be 3 months, I'm just using that as a random example. We're going to give her 3 months. We're going to be the best we can be. We're going to do the things that were asked of us, right? And after 3 months, it still hasn't improved. There is a point where you have to say to yourself, can I continue to do this? And I may need to be the one to step away and let this go. Not that it can't ever be reconciled in the future. It's just that we can't continue like this. If nothing is working, then time apart officially may be best, or it may be a symptom of why we need to let this go for good. But again, we'll get into that a little bit later. But ultimately, there is a level of respecting the process and the time and discussing how we add framework to this to make this easier to navigate through. All right, so we got a few more to go. So another great thing to do when you're trying to regain her trust is to show up as a better man in all the ways that you can. All right. So one of the mistakes a lot of guys make when they're trying to, fix things with their girl is they're just so focused on that specific issue only, and they're ignoring the fact that there's other areas that need improvement too. Now, there are some scenarios where literally you could have been amazing in all the areas and it's only this area that's causing a problem. So in that case, yes, focusing on just that is perfectly fine. But this is an opportunity to take a step back and say, okay, what ways can I show up better? And not just for her. This is your opportunity for growth as a man overall, okay? So if, for example, one of the issues that led to the breakdown of the relationship is poor communication, all right? You learning to be a better communicator is not just for the sake of getting her back. It's for the sake of you as a man being able to have healthier, better relationships with people because you learned how to communicate better. And if, God forbid, things don't work out with her, you'll be much better equipped in your next relationship. But if you're just focused on her right now and what it takes to make things right for her, what I've seen many times is guys work on improving in that specific area. Things fall apart with the girl for whatever reason. Let's just say she just can't seem to get over what happened. And now they let all the work that they put into themselves go because to them it's like, what's the point? Nothing worked. It's like, but it would work for you. Maybe this is no longer for you, but you're still going to need this skill going forward. So identify all the areas you can show up as a better man. Also, what that does is, for that woman who is struggling with trusting you again, struggling with embracing being vulnerable to you again, what she wants to see is growth. She wants to see that there's actual change or evolution that has occurred. And so for a lot of men, saying sorry, plenty of women have heard sorry millions of times. Plenty of women have heard, I'm going to do better. I won't do that again. Like, those words have come out of many men's mouths and many women's mouths. However, what's going to really resonate is when they can see there's a change in you, when they can see your energy is different, when they can see your mindset's different, when they can see how you show up for things in general. Like, again, not just with her in that specific issue, but you're just becoming a better man overall. And again, that at least adds to her ability to trust again, to embrace being with you again, to feel safe again, giving this another chance or allowing this to move forward, okay? So identify what those things are. And, sometimes you got to take a step back and think about, like, a lot of times couples get into arguments, and in those arguments, women will point out, let's just say she says something like, oh, you don't ever consider me, right? But in that argument, you're so focused on whatever you're arguing on the surface or whatever the main issue was to you that you don't really pay attention to that. But if you take a step back sometimes and really recall, for some of you, I hope y'all were listening when she was talking, but recall some of the things that were said can be cues to, can be clues to, oh, you know what? Maybe that's an area that I've been overlooking that I can improve upon. That I don't have to, investigate further. She has mentioned this in the past, so let me improve in this area. But again, not just for her, but for the sake of your own growth as a man and how that's going to be beneficial for you in all areas of your life. All right, so here's another big one that is going to be very beneficial when trying to regain her trust. And that is be willing or be open to do counseling. But I'm going to go a step further. Don't just be open to do counseling. Actually suggest it. Actually be the one to push it, okay? Because here's the reality. For a lot of women who deal with conflict with their partners, and they suggest counseling, there's resistance to it. And I understand the resistance that a lot of men have to counseling, all right? I get it. A lot of them feel like it's very one-sided. It doesn't truly address the issues properly. They feel ganged up on. There's all kinds of negatives. I get it. But it can be very beneficial when you find the right counselor or coach to go to, okay? And the fact that you are willing to throw it out there as in suggesting it, for a lot of women, because the average man does not do that, that will strike her as, oh, he's actually serious about doing better. Oh, he's serious about fixing this issue, okay? And that will make her feel more comfortable, or at least it will increase the chances of her willing to proceed with you, all right? So, and don't just suggest it, because I've seen situations where the man suggested, the woman might be like, all right, I'm cool with that. If you find a counselor, we can do, I'm willing to do this with you. And then the guy don't put any effort into finding the actual counselor. It's like, don't say it. Be serious about doing it. All right. It can be helpful. Now, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes for a lot of you, like, listen, counseling is good for you as an individual. All right. And there's a lot of guys who have unresolved deeper issues, unresolved deeper traumas that they've been holding on to, and they don't realize how it's negatively affecting them in their life, in their relationships, even in their careers. So don't dismiss or devalue how this can be very impactful for you as an individual, right? But it absolutely definitely can help when trying to reconcile things with your partner. So be willing to look into that. There are tons of resources now, and take that step. At least give it a try. You know what I'm saying? And I think that will, again, at least allow her to feel like you're being intentional and you're genuine about your desire to do better and correct whatever it was that went wrong in the relationship. All right. So just a couple more and we're going to wrap this up. Another thing to do when you're trying to regain her trust is you have to commit to communication. Okay? So one of the biggest complaints women make about men is an unwillingness or inability to communicate and to open up and to discuss deeper issues. Now, I know there's a lot of talk about don't be vulnerable with a woman, all these different things. Let's not even look at this right now from the perspective of having to be vulnerable. You at least, you know what, actually, there's really no way to separate it, because what I was gonna say is that you've gotta be at least willing to discuss deeper issues with a woman, but that's going to lead to some level of vulnerability. Now, here's the thing. I think when a lot of men hear be vulnerable, they think someone saying cry in front of the woman and all this stuff and just let all your emotions out. All that's not necessary to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is simply opening up. Vulnerability is being more transparent. Vulnerability is going deeper than you would with the average individual, okay? And what's required in a discussion like that is just, again, being willing to express how you feel. And understand this, you can do that and maintain masculine energy. It's not the expression of feelings that will make you look feminine or cause a woman to potentially lose respect for you. It's how you express it. So, for example, it's one thing to say to a woman, you know what, I've been struggling late. I'm just giving a random example. I've been struggling lately because I feel very deeply for you. I care about you, but sometimes I fear like I'm gonna lose you, and I don't know if you're really as into me as I'm into you, right? So that's me being vulnerable, expressing deep feelings, right? Being very honest and transparent about something I'm struggling with. Expressing it that way is very different than being all emotional, maybe even whiny, crying. And it's not that crying, period, in general is so bad. But there are certain things that, yeah, if you're crying about, it might look a little weak depending on what we're talking about, if we're being real, okay? And the reason is because it's showing a level of emotional instability depending on what the issue actually is. So you got to understand the difference. Like you can still maintain a masculine frame while expressing feelings, desire, all these different things. It is possible, all right? But at the end of the day, like, you've got to be willing to commit to communication, because a lack of communication causes confusion, and confusion creates chaos. And if there's chaos, how can she trust you? How can she feel safe? What's going to put her at ease to allow her to feel like she can be with you? And without her being able to feel safe, even if she's with you, she can't give you her best. Because that's the thing, like there's no point in getting her back or regaining her trust or whatever, continue this relationship if we can't give our best to each other. So to do that, we have to be willing to commit to communication. And for some people, that's going to require adding a level of structure where maybe it's like, all right, once a month, we sit down, like I call it a relationship checkup, where we sit down, we discuss what we like, what we don't like. We're able to be transparent with each other. It's a safe place. We don't get to use what we say to each other in this discussion against each other. This is a way for us to improve the relationship, right? Or even if it's like how some people have a date night, well, maybe there's a talk night. And it doesn't have to be like a whole night of talking, but we commit to whatever structure of communication that allows us to both get what we need out of this and for us to be on the same page, right? And to, again, the more we can feel like we know what's going on with each other, the easier it is for us to trust, feel safe, and be happy with each other. All right, so before we wrap this up, I have a very, very important message I need you to listen to. So remember when I said earlier, you have to understand like why you behaved in that way or why you made that mistake, whatever the case may be. And one of the things you have to ask yourself is the mistake or the behavior a fixable issue or a symptom of you being in the wrong relationship? I come across so many men who are trying to make things work with a woman who is not for them, who they did not belong with from day one, right? But for various reasons became attached to, have a strong desire to try to keep her in his life, right? And keep things going. And they're so blinded by their unhealthy attachment to her that they're ignoring the fact that they don't belong with her and she doesn't belong with them. They're ignoring the fact that, like, we're so focused on this current issue that's happening, that's causing conflict, but we're ignoring the fact that this relationship has not been great from the start, has not been healthy for a long time. Like, there's so many other issues there. Or we're ignoring the fact that even though we desire this woman, we don't have a genuine connection with her. And I'm gonna tell you, if you don't have a genuine, deep connection with that woman, expect for things to fall apart at some point. You know, I won't get too deep into it right now, but when you hear these stories of the woman just waking up one day, X amount of years into marriage and saying, I can't do this anymore, I'm gone. 99 times out of 100, if not 100 out of 100, I can almost guarantee they had no connection. All right? And it wasn't just this sudden, all out of nowhere, this isn't gonna work. There's been things, brewing for a minute, but people are overlooking stuff. I sometimes get DMs from guys who will list off all the wrong things in their relationship and then still end it with, how do I win her back? It's like, it just shows how many people are overlooking the red flags, overlooking the issues because they're just locked into what they feel they want. So as a man, you've got to ask yourself, is this a deeper issue or symptom of, I don't belong here and I need to let this go? And if I'm struggling with letting this go, now let me understand why that's the case. Let me address that issue, all right? Because once I address that, one, I will have the strength to let go if necessary, or it will make things a lot clearer for me if this is truly the woman for me, or am I meant to go in a new direction? And now she stops. This is a red flag that needs to be addressed. Okay? Now, again, we don't automatically assume she is sleeping with